Joining us now, member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, also director of the Transnational Threats Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Thomas Sanderson, and former House Majority Leader Eric Cantor, who has just endorsed Jeb Bush for president. Good to have you all on board.
Good to have you guys here. Senator, let's begin with you. What do we need to be looking for from Congress? As there's more talk about aggressive actions, possibly more boots on the ground, do we need to declare war against ISIS?
First, we have been at war against ISIS since August of last year, when we began running military actions, taking airstrikes against ISIS, first in Iraq, then in Syria. Remember the Yazidis who fled on Sinjar Mountain. The president sent an authorization for military force up to Congress in February of this year. We haven't taken it up. We haven't debated it. We haven't authorized it. We should. I think that's our constitutional responsibility. It's difficult for us to come to consensus around our policy and our strategy, but we should. Second, we need to do our homework and have a responsible bipartisan conversation about what is the refugee screening policy, what are the weaknesses or threats that we now need to assess in light of this Paris attack, and what more should we be doing to fund and support the Department of Homeland Security so it can keep us safer and so it can make sure, as the federal agency principally responsible for making sure that those who come to this country are appropriately vetted, that we've dealt with any new threats.
Thomas Sanderson, how great of a threat is ISIS to the homeland?
It's pretty significant, not the same degree as it is in Europe or in France in particular, where they have thousands of people who've gone to the battlefield. But we do have hundreds of individuals here who have either tried to go or who have gone and who could come back and attack. But it's more the inspired individuals who are heeding the call of ISIS to kill them where they are or attack in place that is a real concern here.
And what do we do? Eric Cantor, obviously, you spend a good bit of time in Republican leadership. In times like these, what do we need to do as a country? Does the Republican Party have a responsibility to be seen as a willing partner with the President of the United States?
I don't think there's any question that when we saw the unfolding of the horror and the terror on the streets of Paris last week, that this sent shockwaves through the communities across America, and people are scared. And I do think that, yes, the parties need to work together. And that's why when we see the President talk like he just did, it really does rile up some people to say, hey, wait a minute, what we're doing is not working. We're scared. Mika, you talk about the governors and their reaction. What we need is a plan. And as you said, I've endorsed Jeb Bush since the summertime. And when he gave a speech at the Reagan Library, he said, we need a plan not only to rebuild our military, but in order to do that, in order to keep America safe. That's why we need to do
Jeb
that.
Bush yesterday morning, talking to Bloomberg, said that we have a tradition of accepting refugees into this country, and we need to continue that tradition. It sounded as if he, too, was disagreeing with most of the Republican governors.
So I think where Jeb has come down on this is say, first and foremost, we've got to keep our country safe. And the visceral reaction, we've seen that occur. But Jeb has also said we've got to be sure that our vetting process is something that actually works.
So we have one, first of all. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so we're at least having a conversation where we all agree that there is one.
Process.
I have it here.
It is not as complete as other vetting processes because it is hard to go back and get information from the state of Syria on the people who want to come to this country.
Well, that is usually the case that you are dealing with when you're dealing with refugees and people who are persecuted and running from their homeland. We don't have a database to work with, which is why we have an extensive vetting process that lasts over 18 months for these families, where they are given physical tests, they are interviewed multiple times, health exams. Why don't you all look at the vetting process and tell me what
Senator,
is wrong with it?
Is the vetting process good enough to accept 10,000 Syrian refugees as the president wants over the next year?
We have a thorough and detailed vetting process, and actually later today there's going to be a bipartisan classified briefing for the Senate, so we all are working from the same common set of facts.
So should we continue with the president's plan to accept 10,000 Syrian refugees over the next year?
We should be working first to make sure that the vetting process is as thorough and secure as we are told it is.
Right.
We should reassure ourselves that it actually is as secure as we understand it to be. And we should move forward to continue accepting refugees that have been thoroughly vetted and pose no risk to the United States.
So can you give me an answer today on the 10,000 Syrian refugees the president wants to bring in
I think we first have to assess the thoroughness and security of the vetting process
Richard Haas.
on a bipartisan basis.
Joe, we need a vetting process that's looks good and can handle scale, but that's not enough. We also need a policy of integration that once people who are vetted or let in, that they are integrated as fully as they can within that society. And then we need a monitoring policy. And this gets into this whole area of NSA and the issue of private security versus collective security. And what, if any, ways we need to adjust that balance. So I don't think it's enough to put all the burden on vetting. My view is we do need to let these people in. It's not simply consistent with our DNA, but it's consistent with American security. People are worried about the downside to security if a few bad people get in. I'm worried about the downside to security if the United States alienates many of the Muslims already in this country or other Muslims around the world if we erect a barrier to Muslim immigration. So to me, the answer is yes, vetting, but then also integrating and monitoring as needed. You need a total policy.
And Eric, that's what the United States does. So much better than Europe. We do know how to integrate so much better than Paris.
This raises the question of the other controversial issue, which is the metadata collection program, because Richard talked about the need for us to make sure that we're safe once we let folks in. But, you know, Congress went about taking away a lot of those tools, and this is something that, you know, Jeb Bush has been talking about, saying, hey, I've said all along we shouldn't be giving up the metadata collection tools that our law enforcement and agencies have to make sure that we are safe, to watch the potential for homegrown terrorist organizations here at home. And that, I think, also has to be a part of this discussion.
Okay, we do understand that we're talking about this after a terror attack in Paris in which the attackers were French and Belgian. They were not refugees, correct?
Well, I don't know if all that has been. I don't know if all that has been definitively determined.
But largely so, yes. Yeah.
Largely so.
But that reinforces the need then to have a surveillance program, a way of monitoring wherever the people have come from, wherever they visited. We do have to have enough of a mechanism in our society to make sure that the people who are here, however they got here, are playing by the rules and keeping the laws.
Richard Haass, thank you. Senator Chris Coons, thank you very much. Thomas Sanderson and former Majority Leader Eric Cantor, thank you as well.